And we've got some folks coming in as we go. Hi, it's Mike Cadieux. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds. We've got some more attendees coming in. And then we're also going to be live streaming. I just want to make sure that I'm live on LinkedIn Live as well. So just give me a second to refresh there. Hello, Ryan. How are you today? Everything going well?
Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you too, my friend. I'm really excited about today's topic. I think this is a big impact transformational item. And as we talked in the run through, I think that this is my newest line item list on the Mike Cadieux infamous no-brainer list. So we'll talk about that in a minute too. Looks like we've got about almost a dozen people up on LinkedIn Live already viewing as well. So I'm just going to click into that and make sure I can see if we get any questions. I'll do some quick housekeeping. We'll do some introductions, and then we're off to the races. So if you just give me 30 seconds here. All right, cool. So anyway, hi everybody, Mike Cadieux from Procurement Foundry here. This is our next Ask Me Anything session, and by that I mean please feel free to ask questions. Ryan is a subject matter expert amongst many that I cannot find somebody who has better subject matter expertise in this particular field, and that's why he's on with us today. He is everything to do with call center, and I'll let him introduce himself. Call center optimization, call center business case analysis, strategic sourcing associated with telecommunications, and we'll get into that in a minute. And I'm really excited to be once again live streaming over LinkedIn as well. So hello to everybody on LinkedIn. Tina is with us today, and she'll be monitoring the chit chat on LinkedIn. So if you want to say hello to everybody on LinkedIn, tell us a little bit of where you are, where you're from. If you're in the Zoom audience, please use the Q&A to ask your questions to Ryan so I can keep an eye on the Q&A here. If you're on LinkedIn and we are monitoring LinkedIn, please put your questions up on LinkedIn so I can then ask Ryan those as we talk, okay? So without further ado, Ryan Young from Acliviti. How are you, Ryan? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about Acliviti, and we'll jump off with that.
Sure. Thanks for the time, Mike. Excited to be
Absolutely.
here. You know, I'm a big fan of Procurement Foundry and everything you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, and just so that everybody knows, let me stop right there. Acliviti is one of our permanent resident sponsors at Procurement Foundry. Ryan's been with us from the jump last year when we first started that program. He's seen amazing results, and he's been backing us all the way. So everybody that's in Procurement Foundry, this is one of the folks that actually helps us run Procurement Foundry and bring you all the events and bring you all the information. So fantastic guy, huge believer in what we're doing. So thank you, Ryan, for your support over at least the last 18 months. Thank you, man.
No problem. So Acliviti, I'm the CEO founder. We're a client-side transformation firm focused on really digital customer experience, which means technologies like cloud contact center, CCaaS, unified communications. We really have an end-to-end practice that we've built around helping clients from strategy through vendor selection, implementation, program management. But I think the topic we're here to talk about today is really the opportunity for the strategic sourcing folks.
Yeah, strategic sourcing, man. That's what we.
Strategic sourcing, the procurement folks. But there's just so much confusion and pain right now for clients that everybody wants to figure out how to be a digital market leader here. But a lot of our clients seem to struggle to figure out how to do that. And there's a big win and a big business case opportunity behind it.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in this. I mean, you know, in the circles that I run around in, everybody talks about how, you know, there's a ton of buzzwords, right? They want to talk about how they're transformational. They want to talk about how they get a seat at the table. They want to talk about moving from tactical to strategic. They want to get, you know, they want to provide ROI and move the needle, help with EBITDA. They want to, you know, prop up their stakeholders in their individual business units. And running through this with you as we did before we even decided to do this, I thought, geez, this is just, I mean, this is a perfect way for procurement to be in that lens, and we'll dive into that. I want to talk a little bit about what you think is happening in the marketplace, from a UCAS and CAS perspective, because I think that there's some really interesting dynamical and fundamental changes in that marketplace that I know you're seeing. I also want to talk a little bit about why you think procurement and sourcing, especially technology sourcing, is uniquely placed to be able to have visibility into this opportunity. And then I want to talk a little bit about how our folks can potentially build, present, and get buy-in on a case like this, because this isn't a typical scenario, right? We don't have a lot of strategic sourcing people. We typically are the guys who, hey, the guy shows up and says he wants to renew his call center software, and we go out and run an RFP for that. This is a much higher level discussion all around actually transforming one of the departments inside of your organization, strictly because of how how procurement and supply chain folks have visibility that maybe not everybody has, because we are the center that everything comes to, right? And then finally, I think what we should talk about is once we kind of get through all of that, I'm really interested to know if you can just give me some ballpark kind of estimates on, you know, what we're looking at from a cost savings opportunities here, because I think it's really important for people to understand this is not a $500,000 on a $3 million piece of software opportunity. This is tens of millions of dollars in savings, right? If you start to back up a little bit and look at it. Does that sound all right with you? Does that sound like a good path for you for today?
Yeah, this is the game we play from prior conversations, Mike. Yeah. But it's exactly why it's the right time to have the big picture conversation, not just the maintenance renewal conversation, because I think it's only those strategic sourcing folks that can kind of see all of these different things happening at once and have the chance to call a timeout and help their company get a big win.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know I guess it's a timeout, but it probably is a, hey, look at what I found.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to bring this to the table. I mean, this is one of those things where, and we'll jump into it. This is one of those things where I think this really cements someone's spot at the seat at the big table, especially potentially even more for organizations that are, even smaller organizations with big call centers or big customer experience. And that's probably the first thing I want to talk about, right? Is historically speaking, I know that I've been involved in the past with call centers and support desks and things like that. And there's a big transformation right now. So let's jump right into the current landscape of things. I want to talk a little bit about how did a call center become a customer experience center of excellence, and what's the difference between the two? Talk to me about what's happening and emerging as far as the tools are concerned. And I'm really interested in the changing dynamic and how that has, it's a completely different item than it was even 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. So I think this one is one of those weird moments that it's easy for us as consumers to describe what we want. We never want to call 1-800 again. We absolutely expect an app, right? We need an app that has chat, that has text. I want you to find me and follow me and tell me when my Grubhub order is going to be at my door. I want all of that. And when you go look at the spend basis for most large enterprise companies, they're still on the 5 to 20-year-old Cisco or Avaya phone system call center technology. And along the way, they've maybe been trying to piece part together a chat or a something. But all that's doing is creating really a bunch of tech debt around legacy platforms that don't integrate with new things. And then the end user, the consumer, experiences that clunky experience and they don't like it, right? And so that's why all that has been brewing. It's been coming for years. I don't think it's a new concept of all this. But once COVID hit, you're talking about the fact that you lost interperson relationship as your business model. You were forced to live and die off of your digital customer experience, your ability to service people anywhere, anytime, any communication method they choose. And so the bar has been raised. And that's why CEOs and board of directors, I don't think they're just using buzzwords. I think they know that their brand's growth or potential death kind of sits right here, but yet no one planned for when IT would get a huge influx of money to just go solve this. And with COVID last year, it's still, people were operating off of fairly thin budgets. They weren't given extra money to innovate during a lot of that time. So that's why the sourcing opportunity is to kind of hear those messages from the C-suite, who I think sourcing has a pretty good relationship with. They kind of know the pulse of those priorities. But it's a question, how do you take the buzzword things that you rattled off, digital and transformation and digital experience, and how do you figure out where those things are going to show up in the negotiation relationships? Because it's not the legacy vendors anymore. It is all about the cloud marketplace of how these things operate.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the legacy part of it, which was, I mean, if I had to put myself back in the days when I used to run, and you said Avaya call center, I literally used to run an Avaya call center, right? Back in Y2K. I mean, it was 20 years ago, and I bet you that Avaya call center is still up and running. And I think what's happening, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that folks have kind of masked the call center, support center organizations have gone to IT and said, hey, we need a technology solution, right? And over the time they've said, but listen, we can't rip out the Avaya call center, man. It's too embedded in what we do, right? So what they've done over time is they've kind of just hodgepodge together and masked it under this best in breed theory of, oh, we'll go out and get a spot chat bot, or we'll go out and we'll get a spot this, or we'll go out and try and solve some of the problems or some of the contact opportunities that today's consumer wants, right? And today's customer wants. But what they haven't done is really step back a little bit and said, hey, listen, if we step away and don't look at the actual cost for a minute and look at the enhanced engagement models that are now available in the marketplace, this really changes the dynamic of the customer experience and potentially keeps, continued long growth revenue in place, new acquisition of clients due to emerging, Gen X and Gen Y, I mean, millennials, right, who are now looking for that experience. I mean, I don't think my 18-year-old son is ever going to call a call center, right?
Zero.
Yeah. So I'm interested to know, just from your experience, because I know at Acliviti you help strategic sourcing organizations to go through this and to help build the business case. How are, in your opinion, from a legacy perspective, how are procurement organizations acquiring these things now versus what we should start to look at as a transformational project, as opposed to just a tech RFP that's getting handed them by IT and a call center?
Yeah, the challenge you have, and I think sourcing is getting hit in marketing and a couple other categories in a similar way, but it's happening faster now in this category, is you get a lot of people that try to solve a specific problem, and they go try to find a specific one-off solution or a piece part. You've got the business unit who's frustrated that IT can't transform faster, so they go buy some eval license or some basic POC. And so what's happening is you kind of hit the nail on the head that IT hasn't likely been given permission to do an overhaul transformation yet. So they're still finding ways to renew maintenance and keep on-prem vendors and managed services and maintenance going, while all of a sudden new money is being dumped into many one-off piece parts. And it's not a good strategy, and it's not operationally efficient. It's not delivering the reports and the integration capabilities that the clients want. And so you end up spending twice the money and you don't get the benefits. And so that's one of the reasons why timeout's not the right word, but the ability to explain the business case opportunity, that if the goal is the outcome of the results that they want, to move X% of interactions from voice to chat and to digital and to text. If you kind of start with the end in mind, and we have all the models kind of pre-built for all of this, but you start with where you're trying to get to, and then you back into which tools allow that to happen, you'll figure out that this self-funds itself and has instant ROI available if you keep day by day adding one little piece part here, adding another there, you're probably going to end up with a bunch of things that don't integrate with a lot more spend. And so that's where it's kind of the doing both of trying to maintain the legacy and trying to piece part some things on the other side. It's essentially, it's missing strategic direction by the executives to say, no, here's what we're actually going to do to build out the experience we want. Does that make sense? I feel like this is exactly where the pain and confusion comes in, and it's about getting clear on this piece.
Yeah, I think it's really clear to me, which is hey, listen, we can continue to renew the existing pieces of the pie if you want, right? So I can continue to go back out and run RFPs and run annual maintenance renewal programs on the existing products that we've pieced together over time. And those tools can, they can do the majority of the job, even though there's probably a next generation of individuals who don't want to be engaged in that way and don't want to be engaged in 1-800 dial-up bots anymore, and they want to consume their consumerism or their support the way they want to do it, right? But at the same time, I think that there's a really, really unique opportunity for strategic sourcing to be able to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, is this something we should continue to be doing the same way just because that's been the rule book for the last 25 years? Or is this an opportunity for me to step to the side and say, hey, we need to try something? And here's the other thing too. I think that procurement and sourcing has always built their value proposition around just taking what the business case and the IT team have said to them and said, hey, we want to go back and renew this, go back and save us 3%. I think that this is an amazing opportunity for strategic sourcing to be able to step back from that and say, listen, I can go do that if that's what you want me to do, but let's have a bigger conversation about what's emerging in the marketplace as far as what your needs are and who our customer base is, and take a look at some of the other solutions that are out there in the marketplace, and let me help you build a business case for and partner with you on how we take your $250 million operation from a call center perspective, as opposed to the $5 million software renewal, right? Or the software purchase. And let's go build a business case to show that by implementing some of these other technologies, we're going to drop $20 million in value associated with payroll services, because the bots are going to take 20% of the cost out of the equation. And at the end of the day, the payroll savings, who cares about the software cost, quite candidly, right?
It's right there. That is the exact summary of the case. The labor around supporting the current service models, primarily voice, are 10 to 1 at least, if not 21. So for every 10 million of people spend, there's maybe a million of IT and internal labor and software support. But probably even, the larger the contact center, the more those ratios get further away, right? And so yeah, you're essentially trying to save 3% on a couple $100,000 maintenance at the cost of a $2 to $5 million labor optimization. That delivers a better NPS customer experience and allows you to cross-sell, upsell new products. So like you extrapolate that out over 3 years, and there's not a CFO on the planet that thinks saving the 3% on the maintenance agreement was a good idea, but someone's got to put those people in the room to say, what's more important, a little bit of savings now or the outcomes that we're driving towards? Because essentially they're two separate budget silos. The labor lives in the customer experience business units, right? And sometimes multiple different ones of them. So now you're into corporate politics, people protecting their P&Ls and all trying to figure it out. And so that's where sourcing has the view. They know that the left hand's not talking to the right hand, because they would know if they saw them collaborating together, or if they're each kind of protecting their own fiefdom. And right there's where our work's not that difficult, because the numbers solve themselves. It's the helping people gather the data and collaborate the right way is where the outcomes come out. Quick use case, just to like put perspective on this. A client of ours, a large daily deals global retail firm, ended up, once we moved everything over to a cloud-based single omni-channel experience where the same agent could take chats and texts and phone calls, not be passed to 3 different people and 3 different systems and 3 different screens and call me back later. They fixed all that and allowed the agents to serve you the way you wanted to be served. They ended up deflecting around 75% of their phone calls. Means they went away and were served by digital channels. So
yeah, I mean, hold on, just stop right there. I mean, the downhill effects of offsetting 75% of inbound calls into a call center, right? I mean, you've got labor arbitrage, you've got telecommunications arbitrage, you've got IT arbitrage, because now they don't have to worry about the networking aspects of it from a telecom and networking perspective. I mean, there's money coming out of your ears when you say something like that, right? Rather than, hey, let's just go as strategic sourcing, and I want to get back to it in a second, rather than just being strategic sourcing and saying, hey, listen, these guys told me they want to renew, I'm going to do a maintenance renewal. Yeah, listen, I can go do a maintenance renewal for you, right? But rather than before we get to the maintenance renewal, let's talk more holistically about your P&L and see if we can actually drive your P&L down by 10, 15% while improving customer satisfaction and positioning ourselves for the future based on strategic sourcing's ability to be able to understand what's in the marketplace and what's available, and helping them to design a better business case associated with knocking 10, 20% of your labor pool off of your center of excellence and call center, right? By the way, we've got questions already. The lines are lighting up on LinkedIn and inside of the group. I'll get to your questions in a minute, but I want to ask you. It sounds like, and we talked about this before, strategic sourcing and procurement really is kind of the only person that's positioned to be able to see this, right? You've got marketing on one side doing their thing, you got sales on another side doing their thing, you got call center operations doing another thing, you got the finance team doing another thing, and you got the IT operation that's just trying to keep everything, all the blippy lights blipping, right? But sourcing tends to be that center of the universe where we're in a really unique position to be able to look at everything and go, wait a minute, you all have separate goals and needs, but I'm in a position to be able, as a strategic sourcing professional, if I can gain consensus, to really move the needle here and give the office of the CFO what he wants.
Yep. So two things, and we'll move to the questions. First is what you just described is exactly what we learned 5-7 years ago doing these, is that the one language everyone speaks is finance, because they're required to get through the gates of the office of the CFO. And sourcing has the ability to impact which business case or which metrics are pulled together. And they likely just need help to help those BU execs, the IT execs, the finance people, need to help them collaborate together. And they speak different languages. And that's where someone like us has the expertise, because we speak finance, we speak business unit, we speak IT, and then you help pull it together. Because all the CFO wants to understand is, what's the net impact on cash flow? What's the EBITDA impact? But when you start talking twos, tens of millions, you have their attention every time. Then their question is, how do we do this? And that's where a lot of the questions. The other point in terms of why this, and you started off saying this is on your short list of no-brainers. Every C-suite wants these things to happen, but they don't know how to get their teams to collaborate the right way. And every C-suite unanimously will tell their board that they want to be the leader in their category of customer experience. I don't know how you could tell the board you want to be the loser, right, in that category. You want to lead. If companies' competition right now is figuring this out, and the company you work for is not, you're going to get left behind. The scary thing about that large client that I just talked about, That was 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
The
That's amazing to me.
compounding
So
effect of what's going to keep happening in that industry when a leader steps out and figures that out the right way, and you're still asking people to take 1-800 phone calls, right? It's catastrophic to C-suite, brand, sales, other things, and people want to talk about customer service like it's just this afterthought thing. It's
yeah,
not what it is, because the real path is to integrate it with inside sales, marketing, cross sale, upsell, because it's one circular experience. And everyone like that reads an MBA book thinks they get that. This is where it's at. It's right here in the engagement models. So I try to keep perspective that I don't think this is a slowly figure it out in enterprise kind of mindset, and maybe next year we'll try again. I think there's pretty high stakes on this, which is why the C-suite, they need to know what's possible, what competition's doing, and kind of where they're at, because they'd probably think pretty differently. But the hilarious part is it's a winning business case anyway. So it's not even it shouldn't be a tough sell. It's just hard to get the right people into the table to listen to them talk to each other and realize that they're not actually collaborating well today.
I mean, let's be honest here. This is one of those things where the C-suite or the board comes in and says, listen, our customer experience is off. Something's not working, right? And they're going to bring in one of the big four consulting firms to pay millions of dollars to be able to come in and basically tell you what we're talking about right now, which is if somebody were to step back and put a business case at the P&L level aside, rather than just sticking with the status quo, this is an amazing opportunity for strategic sourcing and procurement to be one of those big four consulting shops without the cost of a big four consulting shop, but still getting the recognition in the seat at the table, right? I mean, this is you can hang your hat on something like this. If you're a progressive CPO or a progressive VP director of indirect procurement, right? Because they're not big enough to have a CPO, but if you're a lone wolf that has a decent sized call center and customer experience environment right now, this is a place where you can really make your mark inside of a company, and you can drop tens of millions of dollars off of the bottom line while improving customer satisfaction and potentially improving our inbound revenue, because we all know that servicing an existing customer and keeping them happy generates more revenue than going out and finding another one, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is it. This is what everybody inside of my industry is talking about. They want a place where they can go and say, hey, I made an impact to an operational unit that changed both their operations and saved them money, but at the same time created better positioning and competitive advantage in the marketplace, and ultimately drove EBITDA, right? I mean, this is it.
It's not going away.
Okay.
Customer experience is not going away. The comment about the big four, just to hit that for 2 seconds, we love those guys. I don't see them as competition to what we do.
Yep.
That said, you can't put customer experience into a PowerPoint. It is only something that you can test with your end user constituents to let them show you how they want. So the first step is to get to a cloud set of tools that is easy and nimble to essentially A/B test, like marketing strategy, and let people show you. That large client of ours, they didn't decide in advance that was the percentage of deflection towards digital. They made digital available and gave it to people and cross-trained agents to be able to handle where the demand came. So there is an iterative component of this that you just got to get started. You got to be on the new age capabilities, which are, instead of now 6, 8, 12-week IT change orders, it's now 4-minute change the little GUI button in the tool so that you can try more of this or test that. So it's not as much, I don't think you need the big, long digital transformation strategy engagement here. I think you need to get to the new age tools to allow your users to show you how they want to interact with you. And if you do that, they'll teach you how to service them. And now you have a set of tools that are easier for the business to keep changing workflow instead of IT trying to design code. That that mindset. Let's jump to questions.
I get it. Let's throw some questions out there. All right. We've been chopping this up for about 30 minutes. I'd love to jump in. I'm going to go to, by the way, anybody that's in the room right now, if you've got questions in the Zoom room, please put your questions up in the Q&A for me so I can see them. I'm going to pull down a couple of questions from LinkedIn because we've got one. So Michael Lycan says, question for Ryan, interested to hear your thoughts on captive versus outsourced structures and how that decision could impact the digital strategy and, of course, potential implications and accomplishments resulting therefrom.
Yeah, so I think the question, there's kind of two sides of it. First is the labor pool, the butts in the seats servicing. We think that our clients know their end users and what type of support models make sense. And so we don't have a hard stance on one or the other. But I think the mindset of a good enterprise client should want to control the technology cloud stack so that they can essentially mix the in-source, outsource models as they learn from their constituents. Because what might work for the next 6 months, as they learn more about the digital channels or those capabilities. So I think it's about retaining control of the tools in-house so that you can decide where the best labor skills are to service your demand. And for our larger global clients, that's quite possibly a good mix of some in-source and or BPO type models. In terms of the administration of the tool sets of the cloud vendors like NICE inContact, Genesys, Five9, Talkdesk, vendors like that. There are a handful of managed services vendors in the market. It's not the same ones as the IBM GS, right? It's kind of more boutique folks. So there are different models that we've helped clients kind of work through there for whether they want to become experts in the platforms and drive the features, or if they'd rather use some managed service augmentation there. But that's all just kind of massaging the business case to figure out where the right skills are at. So kind of a cloud mentality across all the answers, which is wherever the right skills are to deliver the outcome is where you should go find them.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too, if that's all right. I want to dovetail in on my thoughts from a ex-chief procurement officer perspective. I think that regardless of whether you go captive or you go outsourced, the end game is still the same. You're still looking for an optimized environment where the operational efficiencies are going to take hold in newer technologies, right? That are positioning your company. I would say, hey, listen, let's fix what we do inside first, and then potentially go to outsource model. I mean, you're really talking here about where the CFO wants to play. Does he want to have headcount or does he want to have operating expense, right? But either way, whether he wants to have operating expense or he wants to have headcount inside of his call center, either way, you know you want to have the optimum engagement associated with the community that you have at large right now, the ability to, like you said, deflect 75% of inbound calls, which was done 3.5 years ago. I mean, procurement and sourcing at the end of the day, whether you're buying the tools and helping staff that call center and operation for the call center for the business unit leader, or you're managing an outside contract through an outsourced third-party provider, you're looking for the same levels of KPI to give your company competitive advantage in the marketplace, right? So why would you go to an outsourced third-party provider if you already know what the rules of engagement are and you already have the roadmap for success? You could probably do that inside without having to worry about having them layer margin on top of it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Mike, you know it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so I hope that answers the question, Michael. If it does, Mike says, makes sense. Thanks a lot. So thanks, Mike. Emery Davis says, what's stopping all of this from happening at most organizations today?
Culture.
Boom, done. Culture. People don't want change.
No, and especially during a year when everyone thought they might lose their job because their company might downsize, then people get fear, resistant to change. And on top of that, the culture that's been built was primarily, and this is more around IT, but a 3-year minimum decision process for a CapEx thing. There was a lot of risk. You couldn't buy the wrong storage system because you'd be stuck with it not performing for years. Cloud isn't the same operating model. You only pay for what you use when you use it if you negotiate properly. Huge important point here that this is a fairly low risk entry point to negotiate into because you can wave it in from a volume basis. But the culture still thinks that they have to understand every possible feature of the product, how they're going to use it. So people are stuck on things they won't get to for 18 months in pre-decision cycle instead of iterating the outcomes and getting into the new operating model, right? And so you kind of get that control and need to understand everything, which was way more important in premise hardware software, not actually as important in a cloud type model where you can get massive benefit in that first 12 months with the first 30% of the capability. And so there's just kind of a mix and match. And then the other piece is just simply collaboration between business unit executives and IT folks that are very busy in their own right. You got to remember the day in the life of someone running a contact center, they might have 25% attrition. That means at any given time, 1 out of 4 people is new, learning how to do the job, trying to figure it out,
right?
And they're doing service issues all day. That's not exactly an environment for great entrepreneurial mindset, right? That's people that are very busy. Yeah. And IT, who's being asked, no matter which year it is, even if the company tripled its sales, IT was probably asked to reduce spend by 3 to 7%, right? And so those are two cultures that have been kind of beat down. And I think it's why the C-suite, I think they got to step up and lead stronger here to give people permission to figure this out. What we find is the fastest way to gain that permission is to frame up the business case hypothetical model. It doesn't have to be 100% correct. It can be 80% correct. Show them the math, and all of a sudden CFOs have money available in the budget. They have funds to help figure these things out. But right now, I think a lot of companies, no one knows who has the ball in their hand. No one knows who's the quarterback of this. You get a lot of this between business unit, IT, and then sourcing's in the middle, just trying to serve the quarterly agenda of what has to get signed, thinking to themselves the whole time, it doesn't feel like it makes good sense. I don't know why we're extending some of these vendors, but the answer is there's just no plan that's been communicated to everyone to figure out how to get to the other side.
Yeah. So another question, then I want to go back and I want to talk a little bit more about building the case. Who are your allies? How do you align? Because really what you're really doing, if you're the strategic sourcing guy who's going to go out and step out on the limb on this thing and go build a business case for a massive change in your customer experience versus just renew that damn annual maintenance contract, right? You got to have allies in this space. You're almost marshaling troops and taking in everybody with you that's in that, whether it's marketing or advertising and sales and the operations team and the IT team, and you're just kind of leading the orchestra, but we're all playing music together, right? But I want to ask one more question before we get to that. So Emery backs up with, Ryan, when you say helping people gather data, and this is from a little while ago, I apologize. When you say helping people gather data, do you mean internal data or external market data on suppliers and solutions? So you're talking about people being able to gather data there as they're building their business case.
Yeah, so a lot of it is just the basic piece parts of user counts, software maintenance agreements, hardware, internal labor, just some of the, maybe we do it all day, so it's vanilla to us, but we just need to understand the current spend basis. We've got the rest of the math for folks on where those external operational efficiencies show up, when a realistic time frame is, so we can fill the rest in. We just need help from the client to understand how they've put their spaghetti together. That probably takes a minute. So we're often spending time with someone to look at last year's annual budget and this year's budget, maybe some GL data, as well as some what I'll call inventory quantities of hardware, software, licensing, things like that. That gives us enough, and we can usually do that in a pretty lightweight workshop to get close enough to go have the hypothetical conversation with the C-suite about, if this was available, would we allocate more time and focus on it? Or should we go do what we're being asked to do and re-sign some of these current vendors and keep the ball rolling down the field? Is that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. We got one more question. How do you feel, why do you feel like IT leaders are paralyzed in the status quo with regards to this subject?
Culture, risk, same theme as earlier. But on top of that, this transformation is more analogous to CRM or HRIS or some of those, where it's meant to be a business platform that the business unit can change those workflows, edit the chatbot responses. It's more of a business workflow system when you look at what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
Whereas the current state is a very tech heavy platform, many platforms and code and third parties that have had to rewrite and edit code. So it's just kind of a shift in knowledge that IT doesn't understand how the new platforms are built and how that shifts the responsibilities and kind of moves it more to like a business relationship manager or a program manager role for IT to build out when the business units can use those features and enable that. So it is a shift there, and that shows up in the financial modeling that IT should get out of a lot of that low level tech work that's not their core business to begin with, and it's expensive to hire third parties for. But I don't know who's properly explaining that to them as well. They're probably influenced by their current vendor partners that are likely the ones keeping that revenue today, right? The VAR selling them that maintenance renewal and some managed service. They don't want their lifeline to go away, even though the platform they're representing hasn't had any capability advancements in years, right? And so there's just, I think they don't know what they don't know about the new world. And so they stay closer to the things they know. And the new world might not look similar to what they're doing today. So that's just a shift.
Yep. Yeah. Listen, a lot of people fear what they don't know, right? And they're stable where they are, and they don't. They certainly, it's an understandable thing, and that's why I think strategic sourcing and procurement is positioned very well to be able to be the unbiased marshal of all of this information, to be able to then present it to, the CFO's office or the board level associated with, hey, listen, we've got 4 or 5 different business units that have needs here. And and by the way, there's a ton of opportunity to save money at the same time, right? I got another question for you from inside of the Zoom room, so thank you very much. It's from Taj. What's your advice on convincing, and this will segue into what I want to do is talking about building the business case, how to create those allies. What is your advice on convincing and helping some stakeholders understand that automation isn't necessarily taking away their job? You don't go digital simply to go digital. You do it to transform and create value, to do other strategic activities, to continue improving. The manual labor, that manual labor you were doing can be focused elsewhere, right? So in a lot of cases, it's re-optimizing of the labor pool that you have, as opposed to cutting. I mean, you can either reduce headcount by optimization, or you can reallocate headcount to more value-added things, upselling, for example, and things like that, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple answers here. The first is that this isn't like a hard cut overnight. this is one of those iterating things. So there's a lot of time and room to reallocate the folks that want to learn and advance skills on this new platform and on these new capabilities that they're looking at to go have a likely salary increase and opportunity increase in their career, because this is where it's all going. But more than that, I think, how to say it? I think when you lay out the timeline of what it means to the business, that outcome that you're backing into, I think it's a question of which stakeholders are you trying to serve. And I think that's kind of the theme of some of this conversation, is that I think the C-suite is the stakeholder that is most exposed right now if they don't find a way to bring these things to life. And they're the ones that, if you can get out of a small, short collaboration or a workshop type session, which outcomes they expect to deliver and what they want to be as a market leader, and then you use that as the North Star, you can align culture and people around what is it going to take to go achieve that. And so that's what it's kind of the top down mindset. When you get permission and clarity from leadership on what you're solving for, then automation makes sense. And the only way you could get there would likely be the type of things we're discussing. If you go to the practitioner that's an expert of one specific thing and ask them to learn something completely new, and you don't enroll them into what it means for the greater good of the organization and why they should want to participate, then you're likely going to get resistance. And so that's where I think that you hear me saying things like, I think leadership has to step in stronger here to make sure that everybody has a SBA shared by all view of what you're trying to accomplish and why that will have some waves or phases of deployment. And that's the kind of stuff that when we build the financial plan, we essentially milestone that stuff out for a client so that it doesn't feel like they're trying to swallow the elephant and change everything overnight. That's not human behavior to begin with. The technology doesn't do that for you. The technology is just something that, as you wave it in, it allows you to skill up in the places you're going to need skill for the next 3 to 5 years, and then start to skill down in the places you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we use, in my world, we use the word stakeholder a lot, right? And the stakeholders in my world typically are the individual business units. So the chief marketing officer, the head of IT, the head of operations and support services, and some of the finance folks. But I think what you're saying, if I hear you correctly, is there's another set of stakeholders here. Those are really your peer organizations that you're going to help draft this manifesto of moving and transforming your company forward, while at the same time, you're collectively going to be the person who's gathering up the troops and presenting the data in the business case to, like I said, either the CEO's office or a board member who's really interested because he's hearing that the customer experience just is not there, and that's going to be a draw on your company now, and probably even more than that. I mean, God forbid, but if I was in competition with a company that deflected 75% of my inbound calls 3.5 years ago, and I didn't match suit in less than 12 months, I got to believe that it's just a matter of time before I'm out of business, right?
Yeah.
Especially in that space. I mean, you're talking about a digital product in a digital universe with a digital first company. I mean, if you can't compete at that level that quickly, you're not going to be able to compete, man. You're going to be a dinosaur.
But also play back too. What did we learn last year? And it's tough lessons, but we learned that you can't depend on your physical footprint of physical stores or doctor office locations or whatever you do. You have to make sure that you can meet the customer in their location, on their terms, in whatever channel they're willing to communicate with you. If you won't do that, somebody else is going to, right? And so that's where we spend a lot of time with large enterprise. But what's scary is the pace of adoption of the small, more nimble competitors is destroying what large enterprise can do. And it comes back to this culture. And you're right. It's where I think C-suite has a pretty tough task here to take what has been a slower half-life of culture to do things over 3 and 5 years, and they've got to find ways to do things in 12, 18 months, and that's going to require some different thought. But that's why I think they'll welcome the sourcing type person, say, hey, I think I can see something between the weeds here that we should be looking at differently. Am I wrong on this? I don't think it's about bringing the answer. I think it's about raising the question. And then if there's one simple 5 to 30-minute thing to try, just put 2 of the stakeholders you mentioned in the room and ask them if they can give the same answer to each other about what they want from customer experience transformation. And literally you'll get crickets and or 2 completely different things. And all that's going to show you is that how could the company be aligned? How could C-suite be confident that the plan's going to execute if they can't even get 2 of the chiefs, right, or 2 of the leaders to say the same thing, right? Yeah. And so what are the chances that the downstream sourcing decisions are aligned? They're not, yeah. Right? And then that's where you use that as a starting point. Grab someone like us to come sit and collaborate and co-host a session like that and ask some more direct pointed questions and share some sample use case or some sample models. And you'll likely have really good conversation about what could happen by when. Yeah. Right.
Another question. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't interrupt, but we only have 9 minutes left and I want to get some more questions in. So one of the questions is, can you tell me a little bit more about what a business case, like you've been talking about a lot of business cases for this. What does a business case look like for, can you kind of just run me through, in my mind, what does a business case look like? And I know you and I have talked about this where the actual software or the support services is kind of an afterthought because of how low it is on cost basis versus the improvement, and how much of it is cost and cost optimization versus market positioning. So how do you help your clients build that business case, and what does that business case look like? What elements are in that business case? Because I'm sure it's a lot of cost savings opportunity, but at the same time, it's going to be marketing position and other things that are going into that business case.
Yeah. So the first 2 components, well, before I even talk about the components of it, let me say something that will help everyone feel better, is that everyone will lie to you and tell you they need a singular view. I just need to know the in-year impact. I just need to know the 3-year ROI. I just want to know that what's the total investment over the first 18 months of the plan. And they're all lying because they need all 3 of those. They always need the in-year impact. They always need the next 12, 18 months so that they can plan resources. And they need the 3 to 5 year because different stakeholders have different priorities and they need to understand. The C-suite cares about both the in-year and the 3-year because they got to answer the 3-year to the board and the in-year to keep their job, right? The line level VPs care about the impacts of planning and how they're going to manage because they can, what's going to happen in the next 3 months is going to happen anyway. What's going to happen over the next 12 is whether they hit their bonus targets or not, right? And so we're always looking for the inputs of hardware, software, telecom, and internal IT labor. That's how we're putting together the cost basis of what's there. And from the business unit, we're looking at number of agents, skills, type of skills, trying to kind of figure out, and that's likely across a handful or multiple different sub-business units or business groups or pieces like that.
Yep.
So we're putting those things together. That gives us the snapshot in time of what they're supporting today. And from there, we start extrapolating out essentially that 18-month plan of a couple months of decision criteria, RFP negotiation, what the client needs to get through the sourcing component.
Yep.
But also, we're continuing that math to understand what that implementation phase looks like and the internal resourcing required from the client and or the augmentation of third-party professional services from the vendor, from managed services, whatever those pieces are, because we know the CFO is going to want to know the net impact of all of that, not just the IT budget impact, not just the business unit impact. They want to know the net. Right. And so that's where when we put those things together and add in the market opportunities of what type of outcome targets, board level things they want to talk about, things like NPS or retention or whatever. We take the baseline of where they're at today and we project where we believe they can get to. And the hard part is just when, right? And then that comes back to, is their culture interested because it's so attractive in years 2 and 3 to invest faster in year 1? Or do they have lightweight funds in year 1, so all they can get through is the plan and the vendor process this year, but they'll have to do a slow ramp or wave in of that? And so that's where, for us, it's just kind of an accordion, if that makes sense, of whether we're trying to pull it all in or if we're trying to slow it down.
Thanks, man. We got 5 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, this is what your company does, right? Your company helps organizations take a step back, take a look at what's possible, how to frame that, how to engage the right people, how to collect all the right data, how to build the business case. Then once build the business case, how to go through a vendor selection process that's best for your organization, depending upon your size, your expectations, your KPIs, what your marketing and your sales teams want to get out of this whole thing, what your senior leadership wants to get out of this team, what their timetable is. I mean, all of those things you're doing for them, all the way through manage and you do project management work associated with deployment of these strategies as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, essentially we're signing up. A COO once asked me a tough question. This is maybe 8 years ago. We're negotiating to pull apart a large outsourcing agreement because they wanted to cloud and transform. And we looked around the room, and his CIO and his CFO were in there and said, who has their X on the back, right? Who's the one that, whether or not we hit these KPIs, I want to know who to point at. And I had to raise my hand and say, that's us, right? We're there. And so that means that we want to stay next to the client because we're involved in the strategy, we're involved in the framing, we're involved in the execution. We're going to essentially stay engaged quarterly at the very least to review vendor QBRs and outcome targets to see, is everything we promised coming to life, or are we off track anywhere so we can make adjustments? It's not an outsource. We're not a managed service of those things. It's a la carte to use us in the way you need it.
And you're vendor agnostic, right? You don't, I mean, you're going to find, do you care? I mean, it's the best fit for the purpose, right?
Yeah, I would say that we care based off of our experience for what a client's trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But I think there are great vendors and capabilities in the market. But we try to let the client's decision criteria drive where they should be spending the most amount of time to assess the vendor marketplace of what they need.
So 2 things. One, is there a specific industry or a specific company size or a specific call center size or anything like that? Is there anything specifically that's poking out to you as like, low hanging fruit? This is a no brainer. If you're in this category, you should be doing this. And then number 2, do you have anything like, an analysis product that you come in and help, people take a quick view of, a quick snapshot to see if this is a reality for them?
Yeah. So I think the usual suspects for customer experience are insurance and hospitality and finance and retail. And so I don't think there's an industry that is currently specific right now. But I would say that every industry after COVID, that customer experience is a C-suite priority. Even if you don't have a massive contact center, I think this is relevant. It's just a question of the net impact of the case. But the zeros get bigger as you get from a couple hundred seats, but we have clients up to 5, 7, 10,000 seats, right? So we play in that large global enterprise space from a couple hundred seats to a couple thousand is where we do most of our business.
Yep.
The math is the same. And to your second question, we have workshops that we provide for Procurement Foundry. You'll get the special Procurement Foundry discount of what we want to do here because
Thank you.
We know that everyone here is passionate about kind of their trade and career strategy, and we want to help. If there's a win sitting right underneath you, we want to help you find it as quick as you can, and then use the excitement of what the win could be to figure out if it can fund more assistance from someone like us. So we kind of take it on ourselves to help a client find the funding to utilize someone like us because the business case itself is going to self-fund it.
So essentially your model is a self-funding exercise.
Yeah, not a gain share, just we don't expect a client to commit to a large project unless it's a win for the C-suite. And so it's our job to help find the range of the win with at least an 80% guess, right? If not better than that, so that the right time is spent to figure out how to calibrate the when and the what.
Awesome, man. Hey, listen, thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. For those of you Procurement Foundry members, Ryan and the Acliviti team just sponsored our Supplier Diversity Inclusion Conference. They had an amazing booth and lots of traffic there. They are doing a ton of stuff with us as a sponsor and as a partner to the community. And although, as you know, we at the Procurement Foundry do not publicly endorse any products, again, this is on the Mike Cadieux no-brainer list of, if you're thinking about a way to leave your mark at the C-suite level, this is something you should be looking at, in my opinion, because I think we as procurement practitioners are positioned perfectly for this. We have the right analytic capabilities. We know all the different cost basis. We know what our businesses are trying to do from a customer retention and EBITDA and new business perspective, because the marketing teams are coming to us for sales, and the sales teams are coming to us for CRM solutions. The operation teams are coming to us for operations. So I think you should take advantage of this. I think it's a no-brainer, man. I said it 5 times. So, all right, Ryan, thank you so much, man. We're out of time. We were over by 1 minute, but appreciate your time today. And this is going to go into our LinkedIn feed, and it will be there permanently. And if anybody has any questions inside of Procurement Foundry, Acliviti has their own channel inside of the Procurement Foundry that you can reach out to them and talk to them more. Ryan's team monitors that. So, all right, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Good to see you. And
thanks, guys.
I love the value proposition of this. So thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, bye-bye.